Third and final video, I'm going to talk about issues that are related to job-based structures primarily, but also can apply to person-based structures. So the first one is talking about reliability. Reliability is the ability of different evaluators to produce the same results when they do a job evaluation, if they're doing a skills evaluation, or if they're trying to come up with competency sets that go within a core competency, for example. Reliability is measured through correlations. If you remember this from statistics, correlations go from 0, which is very low reliability, no reliability, to 1, which would be perfect reliability. Everyone gets exactly the same results every time. A lot of the research on job evaluation techniques shows that there can be very high reliability, 0.9 or above. That's extremely high. Anytime people are involved, anything above really 0.7 or 0.8 is extremely high. So these are very good results for reliability. One thing that helps a little bit too is that most organizations are using market pricing. So the reliability of their job evaluation techniques is not quite as necessary as it was before when all jobs might have been evaluated through a job evaluation. Now you really just need it for the jobs that maybe market pricing isn't helpful because you don't have a benchmark for those jobs. You can improve reliability, however, in your system by using evaluators that are really familiar with the work. And this is really difficult if you think about in a very large organization, very few people are going to be familiar with all of the jobs or all of the work that people do within that organization. You also have to have people who are trained in job evaluation processes. But that is becoming less so in organizations, especially as they go to more market pricing. They don't really need the whole system that they have in place for job evaluations. Some organizations, to increase reliability, require group consensus, which means the whole group has to agree on the evaluation results before they're released to be used to create your compensation plan. And then in some organizations, the job evaluation committees are disappearing a lot of times because they are using market pricing. But as we mentioned before, even I think 2 chapters ago with job analysis, in some places, they give all of that work to one employee, and that employee may even be someone who just started in that organization, in which case you're not going to get a lot of reliability because you only have one person. One person makes all these important decisions instead of having lots of different people helping to make the decisions together. Another issue is validity. So validity is different from liability because it's actually the degree to which the job evaluation assesses what it is supposed to. And for compensation for this class and for creating a compensation system, that the validity is related to the relative worth of jobs to the organization. So is the job evaluation that you're doing help you assess the worth of jobs in the organization? The criterion that we use is the degree of agreement between rankings resulting from our job evaluation of the jobs within our organization and the kind of pre-approved or pre-agreed upon ranking of the benchmark jobs that we have in our organization. The benchmark jobs are generally easier to rank because you only have a few of them. And the jobs are quite different from each other because they're representing groups of jobs within your organizations. What becomes harder, though, is when you're getting into the details of all the jobs you have in your organization to make sure that they're agreeing with the benchmark. So say, for example, I'm just going to use an example from last week from your assignment. So we have tenured professors and non-tenured professors who are tenure track. Tenured means that that is a job promotion status. So essentially they're a higher status in the organization than people who are tenure track or non-tenured. If you could use a benchmark job as like a tenured professor and then a tenure track professor is a different benchmark job. The tenured or non-tenured would be below the tenured. So the tenured is higher on this hierarchy. Well, you could have other jobs or other job titles in between, like research associate professor, research assistant professor, and figuring out where all of those job titles go between these two benchmarks may not be completely clear based on the way that you have written your job descriptions, but also on the criterion you're using, like what are the compensable factors that you care about. And that's where it can be really difficult. So your hit rate is one way that we can look at this as well, another way that we can measure this, and that's the degree to which the job evaluation plan matches an agreed upon plan structure for the benchmark jobs. If you get your benchmark jobs in order and then the jobs that you're looking at within your organization are in the same order as the benchmark jobs. They're not weird. So you don't have someone who is an assistant research professor without tenure who's actually ranked above an associate professor who has tenure for some reason in your organization. That would be like a good hit rate. So that's the way right now that we measure validity in organizations. And it's pretty obvious when it's not valid. If you have jobs that are higher ranked after you've done all of your job evaluations than some of your benchmark jobs that they should be lower ranked than, that's really obvious. So this is kind of makes it easier. The bad thing is for our purposes in compensation, hit rates may not be a really great way to figure out, or even the criterion may not be very good for figuring out whether this is an effective system or a valid system, because the validity is actually about what employees are really getting paid, not necessarily what the rank order of their jobs are. They don't care about that. They care about the pay. So if the pay doesn't make sense based on that rank order, some employees are getting paid more than others. A really good, easy example would be if a supervisor is actually getting paid less than an employee that they supervise, that doesn't make sense to employees. And that would be an invalid plan, even if the hit rate was correct when you were doing your benchmark jobs versus the jobs within your organization. You also have to think about plan acceptability. This is really important as well. So how acceptable is your compensation plan to your employees? And there are two ways that we can improve this, or at least monitor it. First is the formal appeals process. So allowing some kind of process for employees who think that their jobs were evaluated incorrectly to ask for reanalysis or to ask for another evaluation of their skills that are required for their job. And it may be that if you were not able to interview every single employee, that this happens quite a bit then. In large organizations, for example, you just don't have the resources to do that. So having this formal appeals process can fix some of the problems in your system that were created by simply trying to save costs or save time or save the resources needed. You can also do employee attitude surveys. And these are really common in workplaces for lots of different reasons, but you can ask people about the compensation system and how fair they think it is. And that can help you not only get a baseline for how fair people think compensation is, but as you change things in your compensation plan, you can see how changes happen within those attitude surveys every few months or every year and see if that's actually improving people's attitudes toward the compensation system, especially because we know that's a really important part of people feeling like their job is fair and that they want to stay in that organization. But we do have to think about bias as well. And there's a lot of research on this because a lot of the jobs that are held by women and people of color are paid less than jobs that are held by men or white people. And so some of these differences come from just different levels of education, different experience levels, but sometimes it comes from the internal structures we've created. So job evaluation can be a potential source of bias against women and people of color, but it also can be a mechanism to reduce that bias, especially if you have a very systematic way of doing your job evaluation. There's evidence that says it doesn't support beliefs that jobs that are held by women are undervalued, meaning that organizations are purposefully paying women less because they're saying the jobs that women predominantly hold are just valued less for the organization. It also shows that evaluator gender doesn't affect results. And this is true across lots of gender research. Men and women have the same stereotypes around gender because we all grow up in the same culture. And so who does the job evaluation doesn't always matter. Compensable factors, though, this is where gender bias can come in, and there's some research supporting this. So you can be picking compensable factors and weighting them very differently. So let me give you two examples. Maybe one compensable factor is leadership, shows leadership. However you want to define that. And maybe another compensable factor is works well with customers. Well, we could probably say from what we know about gender role stereotypes that leadership is going to be considered more masculine, and maybe more men will hold jobs that have masculine or have leadership as a larger part of their job versus jobs where people work with customers might be more women. And that's generally what happens in a lot of organizations. Well, if you're going to weight these compensable factors and you're going to weight leadership as worth more than working with customers, you could have already then in your internal structure created differences between men and women's pay and people of color's pay versus white people's pay because of the way that you weighted those different compensable factors, when in fact they might be able to be weighted perfectly equally and they just show up in different kinds of people's jobs. We also have what's called a wages criteria bias. And so this is the bias that job evaluators often know what people are generally making in different jobs before they even start their job evaluation. So what this bias would say is by knowing how much people make now, you may create a system or recreate the system you have now based on the pay that people are making instead of the criteria that you want to use for your job evaluation, which is looking at like your compensable factors, for example. And so you end up just recreating the same system, and so that women and people of color tend to make less money than men and and white people when that wasn't necessarily that's not consistent with maybe the compensable factors that you've chosen to use for your job evaluation that are more aligned with your strategy. So to ensure that job evaluation plans are bias free, or at least that you can reduce that bias, you have to define your compensable factors and scales from the very beginning. Don't even think about who's in those jobs or what kinds of people fill those jobs. Think about what compensable factors make sense for the strategy in your organization and make the scales ahead of time. Then you can start doing the job evaluation where you're going through different jobs and looking at how much those compensable factors show up in those jobs based on the tasks and skills needed to do those jobs. We also have to ensure our factor weights are not consistently biased against jobs held predominantly by women. And these tend to be jobs that are more oriented toward other people or helping people or assisting others in their work. And so we have to consider that the weights should probably be somewhat similar to these kinds of jobs versus jobs that we would consider more traditionally masculine, like leadership or analysis or something like that. We also can apply our plan in a bias-free manner as feasible. So maybe you have people who know the jobs very well, know the tasks very well, do get lots of research for each of the jobs. That would help reduce that bias. You might also want people who don't know how much people are getting paid right now in those jobs so that they can't have this wages criteria bias going on because they just don't have that information to do that.